Gabriel and Michael are already sitting in a Waffle House booth when Bob and Hannah arrive to stop the apocalypse. The food is getting cold, the grief is getting louder, and Hannah, being the only person present with any practical survival instincts, decides to eat first, which is how the fate of humans ends up negotiated under fluorescent lights over coffee, waffles, and a plan nobody should trust this much. This is Chapter 18 of The Trouble with Angels. We made a plan at the Waffle House, so nothing could possibly go wrong. If you want to keep binge reading Bob and Hannah's adventures right now, start at Chapter 1, link in the show notes. Season 1 hub is also linked in the show notes. And if you know someone who loves afterlife bureaucracy, celestial family dysfunction, emotionally compromised archangels, forged divine paperwork, and Waffle House as an emergency summit location, share this episode with them. In this episode, spoiler-free, a Waffle House confrontation, years, millennia, and several emotional breakdowns in the making, Bob arriving with practical urgency, Hannah arriving with questions, and nobody arriving with enough sleep, Michael and Gabriel discovering that we need to talk hits a little different when the world may be ending, and one of the most questionable plans in recent angelic history, which naturally starts sounding better the longer everyone sits in the smell of coffee and grease. Content advisory for this chapter: grief, apocalypse anxiety, emotional distress, family conflict, references to forged authority and conspiracy, end of the world stakes, and ongoing themes of loss, fear, and cosmic instability. This chapter is more emotionally tense than graphic. Previously on The Trouble with Angels, with the fate of humanity still looming over the horizon, Gabriel and Michael took shelter in the holiest place left in America, a Waffle House in the middle of the night. Over coffee, hash browns, and emotional repression served scattered, smothered, and covered, Michael reopened an old family wound disguised as a fond memory, Lucifer's legendary murder mystery dinner in heaven. And for one aching moment, Gabriel remembered laughter, family, joy. And then the diner door opened, because Bob and Hannah had found them at last, and they were bringing trouble in on their heels. Chapter 18, We Made a Plan at the Waffle House, so nothing could possibly go wrong, by Glory Fink. On the night the fate of humanity was quietly being negotiated over coffee, there were 2 plates of food sitting untouched in a Waffle House booth. The hash browns were still steaming. The waffles had gone just slightly limp in the way that suggested they had once been excellent and were now reconsidering their life choices. A small plastic cup of syrup sat between them like a witness who had been sworn in but not yet called to testify. Across from the plate sat 2 archangels. They were not eating. They were not even looking at the food, which, given the circumstances, might have been the first sign that something was wrong. The neon sign outside hummed, the coffee pot clicked somewhere behind the counter, a waitress moved through the space with the quiet efficiency of someone who had seen worse things than this and decided to not ask questions. And in the booth, under the soft, relentless lighting that made everything look both slightly unreal and completely undeniable, a conversation about the end of the world was happening in the same tone one might use to discuss a scheduling conflict, which is how I ended up eating my way through a Stop the Apocalypse planning meeting, which, in fairness, was not how I had planned to spend my evening, but I was learning to be flexible. By the time Bob and I slid into the booth, Michael and Gabriel were already there. Michael had his hands folded neatly in front of him, like he was waiting for a deposition to begin. Gabriel looked like they'd been looking out the window for a while and had not particularly liked what they'd seen. Neither of them looked up right away, which, given that Bob and I had just crossed several layers of reality to get here, felt a little rude, but I decided to let it go on account of the whole impending apocalypse thing. Social etiquette felt like it had already taken a bit of a hit tonight anyway. I sat down, Bob sat down. The table did that slight wobble that all Waffle House tables do, as if acknowledging our presence and reserving the right to protest it later. There was a moment. The kind of moment where something is about to be said, and everyone knows it, and no one quite wants to be the first one to say it. And then I noticed the food. I looked at the plates. I looked at the angels. I looked back at the plates. "Are y'all gonna eat that?" I asked. Michael blinked as if I had introduced a completely new category of thought into the conversation. Gabriel glanced down at the food like it had just been assigned to them and they were still reading the instructions. Bob, bless him, did not say anything at all. There was a pause. Not a refusal. Not even a hesitation. Just a lack of urgency. Which, in my experience, is the same thing as permission, or at least the absence of opposition, which, in a situation like this, was close enough. Great, I said, already reaching for the waffle. Thank you. I pulled the plate toward me, poured the syrup with the confidence of someone who had made several excellent life decisions in a row, and took a bite. It was, in fact, excellent. I took a sip of coffee. Also excellent. If this was the last meal before an attempted apocalypse, I felt reasonably confident in my choices. Across from me, Michael and Gabriel watched this with the polite interest of people observing a hobby they did not personally participate in, but supported in principle. Bob looked faintly relieved, which I chose to interpret as emotional validation. All right, I said, settling in. So, are we saving humanity tonight, or is this more of a planning meeting situation? It seemed important to establish expectations early. I took another bite, chewed, swallowed, and then looked expectantly at Bob. Bob, who had been very carefully organizing his thoughts into something that could be presented without causing unnecessary distress to beings older than the concept of distress, cleared his throat. Michael, he said in the tone of someone beginning a carefully footnoted memo, we believe that the order to initiate the end of... I know, Michael said gently. Bob stopped, which for Bob was roughly equivalent to a system-wide pause. I paused mid-sip. Gabriel turned slowly. You know what? Gabriel asked. Michael inclined his head slightly. Yes. There was no drama to it. No flourish, just the quiet certainty of someone who had already done the math and did not particularly care to show their work unless asked. Bob adjusted his grip on his pad of paper and pencil. I see, he said. You see? I repeated. You see. That's it? Okay, great. Love that for us. This was really streamlining the whole panic process, at least for me. Michael's gaze moved not to me, but to Gabriel. Did you notice? He asked. And there was something in his voice now, not sharp, but kind of precise. Gabriel's expression didn't change right away. What? They asked carefully. Should I have noticed? The absence, Michael said. Of course he hadn't elaborated. Of course he didn't have to. The air shifted ever so slightly. Bob didn't move. I didn't move. Even the coffee seemed to hold still for a second, like it didn't want to interrupt, which felt like a strong indicator that something above my pay grade was happening. The Lord's presence, Michael continued. It wasn't there. Gabriel looked at him, then at the table. Then finally at their own hands, as though checking whether something might have been left there and simply overlooked. They began and then stopped. Another beat. I didn't check. And there it was. Not a failure of power, just a moment that hadn't happened because apparently unprocessed grief not only can short-circuit human minds, but angel minds too. It wasn't offensive. It wasn't even particularly surprised. It was just true. Something small and human happened in the space after that. A fork shifted against a plate, the neon outside buzzed, someone laughed far away about something that did not matter at all, and in the booth, the quiet settled in. I took another bite of waffle because someone in this conversation needed to continue participating in reality. Gabriel looked back up. Is that why? They said slowly. We've been driving across the country eating hash browns? Michael's mouth curved just slightly. Not entirely, he said. I wanted to spend time with you. That landed. He continued softer now. And I thought it might help, he said, if you remembered why we care about them. He didn't gesture. He didn't have to. The whole building did it for him, which was frankly more persuasive than anything anyone had said so far. Bob cleared his throat again, gently re-entering the space like a man stepping around a sleeping animal. Regardless, he said, we are now faced with a more pressing concern. I took a sip of coffee. Which is, Bob continued, that someone has fabricated an order in the Lord's name with the apparent intent of initiating an extinction-level event. I nodded. Yeah, that feels like something we should maybe circle back to, preferably before anyone picked up a trumpet. Michael leaned back slightly, folding his hands again. The question, he said, is not whether we follow the order. No, Bob agreed. The question, Michael continued, is who believes they have the authority to issue one. Gabriel exhaled. And why, they added. Exactly, Michael said. I set my fork down. So, just to recap, I said, we're all agreed that no one is going to blow a horn or raise a flaming sword to end humanity any time in the near future. Correct, Bob said. Great. But, Bob added, we do need to determine who is attempting to manipulate the system at the highest level. Well, that's a sticky wicket for sure, I said, but still notably better than immediate extinction. Bob looked between them, then said with the quiet certainty of someone who had already run through every possible alternative and found them wanting, we need to convene the family. Michael tilted his head. The family, he repeated, or the family. I sat up a little. Okay, I'm going to need clarification, I said, because that sounded like the same word twice, and I have a feeling it was not. One of those definitely sounded like it came with paperwork. Bob turned to me. There are, he said carefully, the archangels. Sure. And then there are, he continued, the others. I pointed with my fork. Define others. Michael answered this time. Jesus, he said. I nodded. Okay, solid. Good start. Lilith, he added. I leaned back. Ooh, we're going big. That felt like a situation where snacks might not be sufficient preparation. She will come whether invited or not, Gabriel said, with the weary familiarity of someone who had already lost that argument several millennia ago. Probably best to invite her then, I said. Azrael could fetch her, Michael said. I picked up immediately. Oh, could he now? Michael glanced at me. Yes. I took another sip of coffee. Please, I said, continue, because that sounded like a story I personally deserved to hear. He did not. But he did wiggle his eyebrows at me and wink, which, I noted, felt significantly less threatening than when human men attempted the same maneuver. Coward. Flirty feckin' coward. What we require, Bob said, gently steering us back towards something resembling structure, is a coordinated effort, multiple perspectives, a comprehensive understanding of both the system and its vulnerabilities. Right, I said. So the plan is to invite everyone with unresolved feelings and hope for the best. Michael considered that. That is not entirely inaccurate. Great, I said. Love this. Conceptually, if not emotionally. They began then to assign. It happened the way these things always happen, not with a declaration, but with a series of small, obvious decisions that somehow added up to a plan. Lucifer will need to be informed, Michael said. You're going to do that, Gabriel said, not a question. Yes. Of course you are, I murmured. Raphael, Bob said. Field, Michael replied, somewhere with casualties. Of course he is, I said. Azazel has already gone to locate Uriel, Gabriel added. Efficient, Bob said, making a small note. Names followed, Jophiel, Cassiel, Hamiel, Serial, each one placed, accounted for, understood in the way family is understood, not through explanation but through history, meaning no one needed to explain anything and everyone already knew where the bodies were buried. And through it all, I noticed something. Bob didn't hesitate, not once. Do you already know where everyone is? I asked. Bob looked at me mildly surprised. Well, he said, I try to keep in touch. I stared at him. You keep in touch, I repeated. He nodded. It did not explain anything. It did, however, explain Bob, which was both reassuring and slightly alarming. Who, Gabriel said, is going to retrieve Jesus? There was a brief pause. Michael looked at me. I pointed at myself. Oh, no. Hannah, he said. Absolutely not. He's more likely to respond positively to a human, Michael continued. I don't even know him like that. He loves humans, Michael said. I am a human, I said, but that does not automatically qualify me for celestial outreach. Historically, that has not stopped anyone from trying. Bob spoke gently. Hannah, he said, you would be the most appropriate. I looked between them. This feels like a trap, I said. It is not a trap, Michael said. It feels like a trap, I repeated. It is a responsibility that you are tailor-made to accomplish, Bob said. I stared at him, then at my plate, then back at them. Fine, I said. But if even a single song from Jesus Christ Superstar starts playing, I'm haunting all of you. That seems fair, Gabriel said. Where, Michael said, shifting the conversation, is it possible for all of us to convene? That finally gave them pause. Heaven is compromised, Gabriel said. Hell is not ideal, I offered. Anywhere obvious will be monitored, Bob added. There was a moment. Then Bob said, almost thoughtfully, Where are your Nephilim gathering these days? Michael and Gabriel both looked at him. Oh, Michael said. Oh, Gabriel echoed. I leaned forward. Oh, what? The Ways and Means reunion, Gabriel said. Still ongoing, Michael added. How long? Bob asked. Several more days, Michael said. It's extensive. Of course it is, I said. Nothing about this situation suggested anything would be small or contained. Bob nodded. That would be sufficient cover, he said. Their shared lineage will obscure any individual celestial presence. Michael's mouth curved. And they love Gabriel, he said. They love you too, Gabriel corrected. Well, Michael is very charming, so there's no surprises there, I said. 24 to 48 hours, Bob said. That should allow sufficient time for everyone to arrive. Michael nodded. That will work. Gabriel inclined their head. Yes. I looked around the table. So, I said, we're doing this? Yes, Bob said. We have a plan, I said. We have a plan, Michael agreed. I picked up my coffee. Nothing could possibly go wrong, I said. It felt important to say it out loud so we could all collectively ignore it. No one contradicted me. Bob turned to me. Hannah, he said, if you're ready. I'm never ready, I said, sliding out of the booth. But let's go anyway. East LA felt like stepping into a completely different conversation. The air was warmer, louder, alive in a way that didn't hum, it moved. Bob pointed. He's there, he said. Great, I said. Cool. I'm just gonna walk up to the most famous Jew in human history and say, Jesus, you've got to come with me. It's your heavenly family. Bob smiled and shrugged at me and then said, I'm confident you'll think of something effective. Which felt like a deeply unhelpful level of confidence in my abilities. I walked over. He was exactly where you'd expect someone like him to be. Not in the center of anything, but not outside it either, just present. He looked up as I approached. Hey, I said. Hi, he said back. We regarded each other for a moment. So, I said, this is going to sound a little strange. That's usually how it starts, he said. Do you remember Gabriel and Michael borrowing your car? He went very still. Borrowing is doing a lot of heavy lifting here, he repeated. Yeah, I confirmed. He gestured without looking away from me to the car behind him. Do you see that? He asked. I turned. It was an AMC Gremlin. I see it, and it's not on fire, so that's cool, I said carefully, which felt like the lowest possible bar and yet somehow relevant. I had a Cadillac Eldorado, he said. Bet, I said. He looked back at me. Did they mention that part? They mentioned a car, I said. They did not mention the exchange. He exhaled. Then I said, I've been sent to invite you to a convening of the family that will start in the next 24 to 48 hours. Capitalization included, which I suspected mattered. They're all going to be there? Yes, I said. Whole family, big meeting, Illinois, Ways and Means reunion. He nodded slowly. Right, he said. So this is one of those situations? It feels pretty important, like humanity needs you important, I said, which felt like the kind of sentence that should probably not be delivered casually in public. He looked back at me, just briefly, at the street, at the people, at something I couldn't quite see, and then back at me. Yeah, okay, he said. I'll be there. Relief washed through me. Ooh, excellent, I said. He turned, already moving. I'd like my car back, he added. I agree, I said. He paused once just before stepping fully away. Not for long, just enough to consider something. Well, he said almost to himself, this is going to be quite a meeting. And then he went to let his homies know that family members had suddenly come up and he needed to make cross-country travel plans. You've been listening to The Trouble with Angels by Glory Fink. If this chapter touched you somewhere tender, please be gentle with yourself tonight. Eat something, drink some water, and remember that surviving a meeting is sometimes the entire assignment. If you're in the U.S. or Canada, you can call or text 988 for the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. If you're in the United Kingdom or the Republic of Ireland, Samaritans are available at 116-123. In Australia, Lifeline is 131114. And if you're in immediate danger, please call your local emergency number. And if you want to help this story keep finding its people, you could tap the heart button. Engagement is magic. Leave us a comment. Tell us which member of this Waffle House Crisis Summit would you trust the least to run a covert operation? And why is your answer probably correct? Paid subs and tips directly fund writing time, audio production, and whatever fresh nonsense the afterlife approves of next. You can become a financial booster by becoming a paid subscriber to our Substack, or you can toss a few coins in our coffee fund on Ko-fi, Venmo, and Cash App, links in show notes. You can also read The Trouble with Angels at Glorious Magazine and on Kindle and on Audible, and hang out with me at Coffee Bunny Crafters Cafe. Both are linked in the show notes. You can also find me, Glory Fink, as @GloryWritesTheBlues on social media, Blue Sky, Instagram, YouTube, Twitch, Facebook, TikTok, and Threads. And remember, if somebody says, I made a plan while at the Waffle House, that is your sign to either run or order pie. Thanks for listening. I'll see you next winter for Season 3 of The Trouble with Angels. Until then, keep your heart open for one more beautifully ill-advised supernatural mess, because Season 2 of Those Damn Brownies is on the way. Goodbye!